what we can see in a blueprint where somebody may be predisposed to more anxiety or aggravation or irritation or lack of empathy or more empathetic. We can see that, literally it's pathways of genes. And I am able to look at those patterns and then talk to an individual and ask questions like, hey, how are you sleeping? And I kind of know what the answer is going to be, but to go back to the epigenetic piece, because I think it's so important in today's world, is there's really, I think, the birth of epigenetics, where we really started to learn the impact of this was with the Dutch famine study after World War II. So that is something. And what is the name of that book? We'll have to put it. Oh, it's sitting on my shelf. Pottinger's Prophecy really helps us understand this. But I think, I think about this a lot in the United States because I'm a naturalized American, but again, I came here and I was in shock. I was in shock because there were just things I didn't know. And one of the things I didn't know, because I grew up with European history, not American history, was truly back then the journey of African Americans and Native Americans. And as I thought about this recently, the impact of epigenetics for them is, here, if we go way back, and the same in the United Kingdom, maybe to some extent in Australia, like you put people on a boat, they became slaves, you pull them out of the culture they knew and you shove them in a culture they don't, take away all their rights, and you wonder why centuries later they're the ones that suffer from hypertension or cardiometabolic issues. Those are epigenetic stamps that can be passed on in utero. And, yes, can you get away from it? Yes, absolutely. We're able to see that. But it's by no mistake that we see that in Native communities around the world that suffer, right? They're the ones that often will suffer the most from a health perspective. Like, well, what's wrong with you? That will be well, what's wrong with you? Why don't you get a job? Why don't you eat right? Why don't you move? Well, those signatures of stress are passed on in the womb. And the work, if any of your listeners are interested, is to read the work of Melissa Epel, so EPEL, and I think her name was Elizabeth Blackburn. I can't quite remember the years, if it was early 2000s, but they were the ones that were studying telomeres or telomeres. Yeah. And were able to look and investigate telomere length, which is that protective cap on the DNA, right? And the difference in telomere length of women in, stressful situations, whatever it was, whether it's like single mom or what have you, or just divorced or what have you. And they were able to correlate that to their environment and be able to see that their offspring could actually be born with shortened telomeres. So they're already starting off the next generation with these changes to their genes that allow predisposition to early onset of things like asthma or diabetes. So it's brilliant work, but we know we can turn these things around. Yeah.
Sobering. I'm at this junction and this conversation where I'm going, where the hell do we go from here? You've shared so much. And at the moment, I feel overwhelmed with the complexity of the human condition,
Yeah.
Like, not only am I responding to my own life, but I'm also influenced by the life of generations before me. So there's this timestamp of stress, and I
Yes.
goes both ways. There's also this inherited beneficial aspects from my grandfather, who was a legend and was a shearer's cook and all this sort of stuff. But we are so complex.
It is. But that's where the work we do in genomics is so powerful, because we're looking at how humans built, right? But I'm also able to ask questions. Like when I'm seeing individuals, very few come in and say, hey, I'm at the best of my health, help me optimize where I am. We could definitely do that. Most people come in looking for help because they haven't found the answers they're looking for. So because we can look at genes and talk to individuals, we can understand their family history and look at genes. We can say, well, I could see where that may be in your history, but let's see whether that has or hasn't impacted you. but because it can literally read the genetics like a tarot cards, you know, it's not like woo woo or tea leaves. It's like, this is how you're built. I know. Because people are always amazed, like, how do you possibly know that? It's not woo. It's like, I can't believe you know that. I'm like, well, that's the field. But for the first time, for the majority of humans, you can sit down and say, this is how you're built. And we know how to optimize how you're built, or to get you out of that ditch or what have you. Because we understand why you feel the way you do, or why that medication isn't going to work for you, or yeah, keto's not probably the right thing for you, or maybe it is. And so it gives people, it's very empowering because somebody can say, I understand you, and I can see where you've come from and how you are suffering. Here's what we're going to do. And so I think it's an opportunity in nutrition medicine to say, we can help, don't have all the answers, but we can help. And that is like the first time for so many people that somebody showed up and said, I understand, and I know what to do.
I would say, when I was going on about the complexity and where do we go from here, just then, the words that you shared, my levels of anxiety came down. And then I wrote down in capital letters the response, part of the response to the complexity of the human condition. Enter science. We can test certain things in the human body that will lead to a strategy that can help us unravel some of the complexity of who we are.
Exactly. And that's a really important point. And I want to go back because you'd asked something earlier, and I said, so my work, I work directly one-to-one with individuals about 20% of my time, because that's proof of concept. You have to have a foot in front of humans to be able to do the other part of my work, which is teaching clinicians around the world how to use this science. But to your point about testing, what DNA testing does is it talks to us about the person in front of us, and it allows us to say, before we suggest a supplement or a change in this or a change in that, let's validate what we're seeing. So that's, instead of like running a REMA test just to see, oh, you're normal. The worst thing anybody wants to hear is, I'm feeling terrible, but all your labs are normal. It is the worst thing. So that means you can't help me, which means I'm not validated because you can't find anything wrong, and yet they feel terrible. Well, genetics allows us to have a much greater anchor or understanding of where the dusty, dirty corner is in how our biochemistry is functioning, to say, let's start here. So I'm able to form an impression, say, we're not going to start, like, supplements or anything is expensive, right? And so we validate what we're seeing before we say, here, take this or do that. And I think that's the most important step of all, that we don't just say, here, just give this a try. It worked for 90% of other people, it doesn't for this person. So we're not just going to, pretend and try things out. It takes the guesswork out of what's wrong.